Hello! In this tutorial I'm going to show you a basic way to add an input buffer to any of your animations. Don't worry about the wizard fella here, he's part of the dialogue system. There will be a new part on that soon. I'm not really sure where to go from this point on, but I'm working on it, don't worry. Since I haven't done a tutorial in a while, I didn't really know what to do either, but now I do. It's this, an input buffer system. So, to begin with, I have added some logic to the third-person character with, first of all, a basic rolling mechanic, which is basically me pressing a key and it playing an animation. I should add a condition to this, by the way, so that I cannot do this while I'm attacking. So only if this is false will the animation be able to play. As for the attacking part, this is what that looks like. I press the left mouse button only if I'm not already attacking, otherwise I can pretty much spam the same attack animations. I will check if this is basically my moveset, these are my attack animations, and I will check, I will get the attack index and get if it is valid. If it is not valid, which means it is trying to access index number 4, which doesn't exist, so it's not valid, so it sets it back to 0, which basically means, and tries again, which basically means if I have completed my moveset and I attack again, it will just do the first one again. So if the animation is able to play, it will play the animation, increment my attack index and set is attacking to true. If I let it complete, it'll go to 0 and set is attacking to false. And here I switch on notify name called next. And that is when is attacking is false again, which means I can input my next attack. So this is what one of those animations would look like. If you have seen the very first tutorial on this channel, you will know these animations from the motion capture tutorial. I have since improved my motion capture workflow, so I might do a part 2 on that if anybody needs to see it. Although it is a pretty standard animation workflow for anything to do with animation at all, to be honest. So it wouldn't be anything special, just me sharing my workflow. Anyway, once it reaches this point where it just kind of stands still awaiting the next attack animation, we call this next montage notify, which means I am able to attack next. Now the problem with this is that I am only able to input my next attack once this next thing has passed. So if I were to input my attack, say right over here, it wouldn't really do anything because it wouldn't store the input, and that's what the input buffer is for. So we store our input, and then once we can use it, we allow it to pass through, basically. Now this system I'm about to show you works best if you only need to store one action at a time. So we overwrite whatever was there. Let's say I try to dodge, but then I'm like, no, wait, I should be attacking, so then I attack. Then only the attack will be stored and executed and not any of the dodges. That's just something to keep in mind. You could modify this. If you need help with that, leave a comment and I'll see what I can do. So anyway, let's get to making the input buffer. So over here, I'm going to add a new folder. Call this input buffer, and I'm going to add a new blueprint class of class actor component. Call this AC_inputs buffer, and open it up. Immediately I'm going to delete these two because we don't need them. Go into class defaults. Actually, I am going to implement event tick. So we don't actually need event tick for this, so don't worry. I'm just using this for some debug things, but if you're done, you can go to class defaults and say start with tick enabled, set this to false to prevent this actor component from ticking at all. So what are we going to need in here? First up are two variables. One is a boolean called, buffer open. This basically means if the buffer is open, we can store inputs. If it is closed, we cannot. And then there is the stored inputs key, which will be a name. Now, I know it says key, but I use key in terms of names as well, because I often use names in combination with map type variables, which has keys and values. So that's why I named it key. You could call this something else because key might be confusing, as you might confuse it with a key on a keyboard or something. But just use whatever works for you. This works for me, so I'm going to use this. So it will only print a string when the buffer is open. I'm going to set the duration to 0 so that it will only appear for 1 frame. And the text color, I'm going to say select color. And get the stored input key equals, well, nothing. So if the stored input key is empty, then this will be red. And if there is something inside of it, this will be green. And what will it print? That will be the stored input key. So now what we're going to need is a bunch of functions. First function I'm going to add is called store to buffer. Another one, call this try from buffer. And the last one, clear buffer. So the clear buffer one is the simplest. We go to close the input buffer, which means input buffer open should be false, and stored input key will be cleared, so we set this to none. And that's it for clear buffer. So then let's try store to buffer. So store to buffer should have one input. So add a new input here, call this key, and make sure it is type name, and set this key to the stored input key. Now before we do that, we need to check if the buffer is open or not. If it is open, we can go ahead and set it. If it is not, then return nothing. Because we shouldn't store the inputs when the buffer is closed. So now let's go ahead and do try from buffer. So for the try from buffer, I'm going to first of all do a branch. So drag out and press B to create a branch. And we need both the input buffer open and the stored input key not equal nothing. Then we get an AND boolean. Combine these together, so it needs to be both open and not empty. So if that is the case, we should send the input buffer information to our player character. Now you could do this with a blueprint interface, though I don't like using blueprint interfaces for this sort of thing, because I find them a bit cluttering at times, having to add tons of interfaces to your character and having to find those functions again and all that sort of stuff. So instead of that, I am going to add an event dispatcher here. Call this on buffer red and give it a new parameter and call it key. Now then, if we pass this condition, we can say call on buffer red and pass in the stored input key as the key. And what we're also going to do is this to set the, we can just say clear buffer right here. And we should clear the buffer regardless. So off of false, we are going to also clear the buffer like this. You can double click on any of these to add a reroute node. All right, so now let's compile and save this. And let's move on to adding things to the animations. So let's go into our content browser, add a new blueprint class, drop down to all classes and say notify state. And you'll see here the AnimNotifyState. So use this, select it. I'll call this ANS inputs buffer, buffer, and open this up. You're going to see absolutely nothing in here. We're going to do 3 different functions. We're going to do get notify name to override. Our notify name override will be input buffer notify begin. We are going to get the mesh comp, say get owner of the component and get actor, get component by class. that class being our AC input buffer. And now we have a reference to AC input buffer on the owner of this animation, which in our case would be the player character. So let's see, I need to clear the buffer. And return value true. So that's pretty much it for notify begin. So now let's go to notify end. And let's see, let's just copy this, Control C, Control V. And now we say try from buffer, which is going to send the event dispatcher. So let's go ahead and compile and save this. And now let's head into our animations. So here in the animations, I'm going to add a new notify track. Call this, whoops, these are so hard to rename. Whatever, I'll just leave it at this. Normally I would call this buffer. And we go add notify state ANS input buffer. Now you may be wondering why we're using a notify state to use this instead of just two notifies, and that's because this just looks a lot nicer. Because even though we're not using the tick, only the beginning and the end, it looks a lot nicer than having two different things here. This way you can really see which period of the animation counts as the input buffer. Now then, I'm going to let this overlap with the next thing, because if I don't, then here it is going to try the input buffer, which means it is going to try to once again input an attack. And it's going to say, no, you can't attack because you haven't hit the next montage notify yet. So I'll let this overlap a little bit so that this actually fires the event properly. Now let's add this to all the other animations. I'm going to make this one a lot longer actually. Oh, now I can call this buffer, yes. So add notify state input buffer. Once again, let it overlap this. And I'm just gonna Control C and Control O, notify track, and call this buffer, and Control V. I'll just leave it at this. And for the final animation, we don't actually set the next animation here, because this is the last one in the attack combo, but I'm still going to put the input buffer here. So I will Control V, input buffer, and yeah, it should fire around here. That's fine. So now I can actually also do my rolling thing. If I need to roll out of this animation, I'm going to end it a little sooner. Now let's do the same thing for the rolling animation. So right here I'm going to paste, and don't set this to the very last frame, because the very first and very last frames, they might not fire correctly because of the blending modes. And you may see here for the blend in, we have a relatively short time of 0.25 as the default, but still there is this thing called, where would it be? Trigger weight threshold. And what this trigger weight threshold means is it needs the animation to be at least this weight on the character for it to be able to fire. Alright, now that we have added all of these input buffers to our animations, it is time to add the functionality of storing and using the input buffer in our player character. So let's go to our third-person character, click compile, and I'm going to add a component, that being our AC input buffer. Now then, from the AC input buffer, we have a bunch of events down here, one of which is on buffer red. Just hit the plus to add the event for this. And let's say when the buffer is red, we are going to switch on name. You can have the default here and say print string and call this, this is basically a warning to tell you that you haven't set the correct key. So basically, let's go to text. So this will make it a text and say format. And the format will be input key not properly set, something like this. The key being, of course, this key right here. And this will print, let's print this red. And for 5 seconds. So, there. All right. Let me move this so that the default thing, this is kind of ugly, I know, but otherwise this default thing is going to be in the way. Anyway, case 0 will be roll, and case 1 will be attack. So then for the roll, I'm going to do the same thing as this, and for the attack, I'm going to do the same thing as this. Now this is going to get incredibly messy, so instead of this, I'm going to say custom event, and call this attack event. And I will do the same thing here, Control D to duplicate and F2 to rename. Custom event becomes roll event. And hook this up right here. Now instead of roll, I'm going to do roll event. And here I'm going to do attack event, like this. So now this will call the events, which is the same as the inputs. So now when the input buffer is being read, it's going to apply these events. Just for this occasion, I have installed a key visualizer, so you can see me pressing the keys down here. Oh, right, we never opened... Oh, let me turn this off. Right. We never opened the buffer, so it's never going to allow anything to go in. So in here we clear the buffer, and then we say... not get, I meant set buffer open. And set this to true. There, now this should work. You can see up there it's printing none because we do not have any inputs available right now. When I click, nothing still happens because I forgot one other thing, which is the fact that we need to set the keys that are going to be stored to the input buffer right here. So let's go and get AC input buffer. Let's say get buffer open. So if the buffer is open, let's see, if it is not open, then we just do the regular input stuff. So here I'm going to say roll event. That's the same as this. Actually, this is ugly. I'm going to do this. Yeah. And if it is true, then I'm going to drag out from AC input buffer again and say store to buffer. And the key here will be roll, which should be the same key as the one on the switch on name case. So make sure these two are always the same. I'm going to do this same thing, oops, for the attack. I'm going to make this, oops, I'm going to make this extra ugly and set the key to attack, because that is what I call it over here. So this should now work. Yes, as you can see, when it says none, I click. Oh, I should enable this. There we go. Here, when it says none, and I can then click, and it says attack, and it does the attacking animation. And now if I press the roll, it did not roll. Is it because I was still attacking? I think so. Next. All right. Now this should work, finally. Yes, no, wait. It's not print. Why is it not printing? Is it because I had 2 viewports? Oh, that's why, okay. Yes, alright, now you can see when it says none, it says, I am also going to, when I roll, set the attack index to 0. Right. When it says roll, he rolls, and when it says attack, he does the next attack, as if we just do the inputs. And there you go, that's one way to have basic input buffers added to your player character's animations. If you found this tutorial helpful, please let me know by leaving a like, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll do my best to help. Anyway, that'll be all from me for today, and good luck!